Have you ever fallen in love with someone who seemed absolutely perfect, but after a few months realized they were exactly the type of person you should avoid? And then a few years later did it again? And maybe again? Most people interpret this as bad luck, misfortune, or lack of judgment, but there is something much stranger happening, something that has to do with the way your brain manufactures the sensation you call love. Neuroscientist Helen Fisher spent decades putting people in love inside magnetic resonance imaging machines. What she discovered completely challenges the idea that we choose partners consciously and rationally. When you look at someone and feel that instant chemistry, that visceral certainty that you have found someone special, your brain has already made a decision, and it made that decision without consulting you. Fisher identified that the human brain operates with four main chemical systems that determine who you will feel attracted to: dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen. Each person has a specific combination of these systems, and your brain reacts to certain neurochemical profiles as if it were recognizing something familiar. The problem is that familiar does not mean healthy, it just means recognizable. Imagine you have a high dopamine profile. You are curious, impulsive, you seek novelty. Your brain will fire attraction signals when it encounters another high dopamine profile. But two high dopamine systems together can create a chaotic, unpredictable, emotionally unstable relationship. Your brain is not asking if this will work, it is just recognizing a chemical pattern and labeling it as connection. Here's the first paradox. The feeling that you have finally found the right person may actually be the sign that you have found the chemically familiar person, and familiarity in the brain is not the same as compatibility. But chemistry is only the first layer. There is something even more unsettling happening. Psychologist Cindy Hazan dedicated her career to studying something that seems impossible at first glance. How is it that emotional patterns you lived through when you were 2 or 3 years old still determine who attracts you today, at 20, 30, or 40 years old? Hazan discovered that the type of bond you formed with your caregivers in childhood created something like a relational map in your brain, an internal model of how love works. And that map does not disappear when you grow up. It stays there, operating silently, influencing every affective choice you make. If love in your childhood was inconsistent, if your caregivers were emotionally unpredictable, alternating between closeness and distance, your brain learned that love means uncertainty. And when you meet someone who is also emotionally inconsistent, something strange happens. Your brain recognizes that pattern and interprets it as true love. The sensation of familiarity is so strong that you interpret it as destiny, as special chemistry, as deep compatibility. But it is just your brain saying, "I know this pattern." Researcher Amir Levine, together with Rachel Heller, mapped 3 main attachment styles that persist from childhood into adulthood. People with anxious attachment tend to fall in love with people with avoidant attachment, and people with avoidant attachment tend to fall in love with people with anxious attachment. It is almost as if there were a magnetic attraction between opposite patterns, but ones that fit perfectly into dysfunction. Why? Because for the anxious brain, the emotional distance of an avoidant partner activates exactly the alert system that was programmed in childhood. And the brain interprets that activation as intensity, as passion, as deep love. For the avoidant brain, the intense proximity of an anxious partner triggers the flight impulse, but also confirms the internal belief that relationships are suffocating. Both are repeating an old pattern, but experience it as spontaneous choice. Now comes the most disturbing part. You might be thinking, "But I feel like I choose. I feel like I decide. When I look at someone and think they are special, that comes from me, does it not?" Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied something he called somatic markers. They are emotional memories engraved in the body. When you meet someone new, your body reacts even before you form a conscious thought. Your heart races, something tightens in your chest, your breathing changes, and only then, milliseconds later, your conscious mind receives these sensations and translates them into words. This person is special. But here is what is unsettling. You experience this as if you were discovering something about the person, as if their unique qualities were causing this reaction in you. But what is really happening is different. Your body is recognizing an old emotional pattern. You are reading signals from your own body and interpreting them as discovery about the other person. Neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett went even further. She showed that the brain does not discover emotions, it manufactures them. When you meet someone and feel that chemistry, that butterflies in your stomach, that certainty that they are special, your brain is not reacting to the present. It is making a prediction based on the past. It is taking old memories, old patterns, and using them to construct the emotion you are feeling right now. In other words, love at first sight is not magical. It is emotional memory in action. Your brain recognized something, fired a series of chemical reactions, and manufactured the sensation called love. You experience it as discovery, but it is actually recognition. Here is the central paradox. The feeling that you have finally found the right person may be exactly the sign that you have found the wrong person. Because right to your brain does not mean healthy. It means coherent with the old maps. Imagine you grew up in a house where love meant emotional intensity, drama, reconciliations, ups and downs. Your brain learned that love is that. When you meet someone stable, predictable, emotionally available, you might even admire that person rationally. But there is no chemistry, there is no spark, because your brain does not recognize that as love. It lacks the turbulence that was always present in your emotional maps. And then you meet someone unpredictable, emotionally inconsistent, who leaves you in doubt. And suddenly, there is chemistry, there is intensity. You feel something, and you interpret it as true connection. But it is just your brain saying, I know this feeling. This must be love. Researcher John Bowlby, who created attachment theory, observed something unsettling in children separated from their caregivers. Even when the caregiver was neglectful or abusive, the child still sought proximity, still wanted to be close. The infant brain cannot distinguish between healthy bond and dysfunctional bond. It only knows it needs a bond. And that pattern does not disappear in adulthood. It just becomes more sophisticated, more disguised. You may be in a relationship that makes you suffer, that makes you anxious, that drains your energy, and still feel like you cannot leave. No, you are not weak, and no, you do not love too much. What happens here is that your brain is operating with an old map where this type of suffering is read as love, where anxiety is read as passion, where uncertainty is read as depth. And here is something that makes all of this even stranger. You cannot simply decide to stop. You cannot wake up one day and say, from now on, I will fall in love with healthy people. Because the decision is not conscious. It happens in layers of the brain that are not accessible to your will. Imagine you could hear, in real time, what your brain is really doing when you look at someone you are in love with. You would not hear, this person is good for you. You would hear, this person activates the same circuits that were activated when you were a child. This person feels like home. And home, to the brain, is not necessarily a safe place. It is just a familiar place. You may know intellectually that that person is not good for you. You can list all the red flags. You can hear your friends saying you deserve better, and still feel like you cannot stop thinking about them, because the part of the brain that feels attraction is not listening to the part of the brain that reasons. They operate at different speeds with different priorities. The emotional brain is fast, automatic, pattern-based. The rational brain is slow, deliberate, analysis-based. And when the two come into conflict, The emotional one almost always wins, not because you are irrational, but because the neural architecture was built that way. Emotion precedes reason. It always has. So what remains? If you cannot trust your intuition, if chemistry can be just disguised recognition, if the feeling of certainty can be just your brain activating old maps, what is left? Something unsettling remains. That overwhelming feeling of having finally found the right person, that visceral certainty that seems to come from a deep and true place inside you, may be just your brain whispering, "I have seen this before." The brain does not ask if it will be good for you. It asks if it feels like home. And sometimes home is exactly the place you should have left a long time ago. You are not choosing wrong. You are choosing familiar. And the brain, unfortunately, does not know the difference.